The rain was pouring, cold and relentless as Clara rushed down the dark alley. Her heart pounded harder than ever. She heard the faint cries of a child, pain and fear twisted in every sob. Without a second thought, Clara pushed through the garbage bins and saw him. Small, bruised, barely breathing. "Hey, it's okay, I'm here," she whispered, kneeling beside the trembling boy. His eyes, wide and full of terror, barely met hers. Blood stained his shirt, and tears streamed down his face like rivers. Clara's hand shook, but she carefully lifted him in her arms. "You're safe now. I won't let anyone hurt you anymore." The world around them blurred as Clara ran, the child clutching her neck with all his strength. She called every number she knew, begging for help that felt miles away. That night, her small apartment became a shelter, a sanctuary for a broken soul. She named him Leo after her late brother, hoping it would bring him strength. Years passed, and Leo transformed from that scared boy into a quiet young man, still carrying invisible scars. Clara watched him from a distance, proud but worried. He trusted no one but her. Sometimes when the nightmares came, he'd wake up screaming, and Clara would sit by his side until dawn. One cold evening, just as Clara was closing her door, a knock echoed through the quiet hallway. She didn't expect anyone. When she opened, standing there was a man with eyes that held stories she hadn't heard. "Are you Clara?" he asked softly. "I think you saved my life." Clara blinked at the man, her hand still on the doorknob. His voice was calm, but something about it pulled at her memory. "Yes, I'm Clara," she said slowly, scanning his face. "Do I know you?" The man smiled gently and nodded. "You knew me when I couldn't speak, when I couldn't stop crying." Her heart skipped a beat. She stared harder, confusion rippling through her chest. "Leo?" she whispered, almost afraid to say it. The man's eyes watered instantly. "I go by Elias now, but yeah, I was Leo. I never forgot you." Clara stepped back, her hand over her mouth, shaking her head. "You're alive? And grown?" He stepped inside quietly, his eyes darting around the small apartment that hadn't changed much. "You saved me," he said again, standing in the middle of the room. "And I ran away before I ever said thank you." Clara closed the door behind him and touched his arm. "You don't have to thank me, baby. You were just a child." Elias sat down on the couch, the same couch he'd once bled on as a boy. "I remember the way you wrapped me in that old blue blanket. You hummed when I couldn't sleep. I used to think angels were loud, but you were so quiet." Clara sat across from him, her eyes glossy. "You remember all that?" He nodded. Slowly, his hands clasped tight between his knees. "Every bit of it, especially the way you looked at me like I wasn't trash." Clara bit her lip, holding back a flood of tears. "You were never trash, Elias. You were a boy who needed someone, and I needed you too, maybe more than you know." Elias looked around, noticing the faded picture of Clara's mother still hanging on the cracked wall. "I used to stare at that photo at night," he murmured. "It made me think maybe you had someone who watched over you, like you watched over me." Clara swallowed hard, her voice breaking. "I haven't taken it down. I talk to her sometimes, especially when I miss you." His eyes dropped to the old table, worn from years of cups and elbows. "Why did you help me?" he asked, not out of anger, but wonder. "I was just a broken, filthy street kid. You didn't even hesitate." Clara leaned back, breathing deep. "Because once, I was that kid too. But no one helped me. And I swore I'd never let a child feel what I felt." That silence after her words wasn't awkward. It was sacred. Elias looked up slowly, his face trembling. "I thought about you every single birthday. I lit candles I stole just to pretend you were there. I even kept that paper crane you folded for me. I carried it across foster homes like it was armor. Clara gasped, her fingers covering her mouth. You still had that? She whispered. Elias nodded. Until it crumbled in my hands 3 years ago. I cried like I was 10 again. That's when I knew. I had to find you. Clara stood, pacing, tears falling freely now. I looked for you. Elias, the night you ran. I searched hospitals, shelters, everywhere. I thought you were gone. He stood too, suddenly desperate. I'm sorry I ran. I didn't know how to feel safe. I didn't believe safety existed. Clara turned, grabbed his hands. You were scared. That wasn't your fault. Her grip tightened. You came back. That's what matters. For a second, their souls stood in the same space. The past, melting between fingers locked tight. He hadn't walked through that alley in years, but the memory lived in his bones. That night came back in fragments. Cold pavement under his knees, the sound of someone shouting, the weight of Clara's arms around him. I didn't know what love was then, he thought, but I felt something that didn't hurt for the first time. In the quiet room, Clara's presence pulled at the memory like sunlight on frost. I used to watch her while she read, Elias remembered. Her lips moved gently, her hands still, like the world couldn't shake her. As a boy, he didn't understand peace, but Clara's home smelled like soup and soap, warmth he never found before or since. He recalled the sound of her humming, a tune without words, floating through dim light as she stitched old clothes or wiped blood from his chin. I thought she was a magician, he admitted silently. She made pain go quiet. I wanted to believe I could stay. But back then, I didn't believe I deserved anything kind. Clara watched him as he stared off, recognizing that look. She'd seen it before, those quiet drifts into past wounds. She remembered the first time Leo flinched when she reached for his hand. He was terrified of kindness, she thought. And I knew that kind of fear. I lived with it until someone said, my name like it mattered. Elias's lips parted like he wanted to speak, but nothing came. His throat clenched as his eyes shimmered with pressure he'd buried for years. He laughed suddenly, a hollow, broken sound that didn't match his face. I rehearsed this moment 100 times, he said, wiping a tear before it fell. But now I'm here, and I feel 10 years old again. Clara moved closer, her breath caught in her chest. Elias, she whispered, reaching for him gently. His shoulders jerked, his breath hitching. Don't, he said softly, voice cracking. If you touch me, I'll fall apart. But her hand rested lightly on his shoulder, and that was it. His knees buckled as he sank into the couch, sobbing like thunder breaking through a dam. She sat beside him without a word, tears sliding down her face too. Her fingers trembled as they brushed through his hair, just like she used to. Let it out, baby, she whispered, voice shaking. Let it all go. His arms wrapped around her waist suddenly, desperately, like a child afraid the world might vanish again. I hated you, he choked, for letting me feel safe, because when I lost it, I thought I'd die. Clara didn't flinch. She held him tighter, her face twisted with pain, not at his words, but at how deeply he must have hurt to say them. I know, she whispered. And I never stopped loving you anyway. He pulled back just enough to look at her, eyes red, cheeks wet, jaw trembling. I didn't come here to just cry, he said, forcing a smile that cracked too soon. I came because I owe you the truth. Clara leaned forward, heart pounding, her breath catching in her throat. Then tell me, Elias. What truth? Elias hesitated, running his hands through his hair, his knuckles still trembling. Before I tell you, I need you to understand, he said, his voice lower, heavier. This isn't just about me finding peace. This is about something that was kept from both of us. Clara sat up straighter, the hairs on her arms rising. What are you talking about, Elias? He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small aged envelope. Her name was written on it, Clara Bennett, in handwriting she hadn't seen in decades. This was given to me a year ago, he said. It came with a name I wasn't ready to see. Clara's hands shook as she took the envelope. Where did this come from? Elias looked her in the eye. A man found me. Said he worked for the county orphan archives. Said they'd found a misfiled case, a foster placement that never should have happened. Clara froze, her blood turning cold. What are you saying? Elias's lips parted carefully. I'm saying, you were listed as my biological aunt. They hid it from you. The room tilted for Clara. She clutched the letter to her chest, her mind racing. No, she whispered. No one ever told me. They said you had no family left, that you were abandoned. Elias nodded slowly. They told me the same. But this letter, it's from your sister, my birth mother. She wrote it before she died, and no one gave it to you. Her eyes filled again, but this time with rage mixed into sorrow. My sister, she gasped. She had you? All this time? Elias leaned forward. Clara, you weren't just the woman who saved me. You were supposed to raise me. We were family, and they ripped that from us. The silence between them swelled with truth too long buried. Clara stared at the envelope like it was a live wire. Her fingers hovered over the flap, trembling. I can't believe this is real, she whispered, her voice hoarse. Elias watched her closely, silent now, like the next sound might shatter her. It's your name, Clara. She wrote it with her last strength. You deserve to know what she said. The paper inside was yellowed and soft at the edges, like it had waited too long to be read. Clara unfolded it slowly, every crease a wound reopening. Her eyes moved over the words, lips moving silently as she read. Then her hand flew to her mouth, and her knees gave out. She dropped to the floor, letter clutched tight to her chest. No, 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 she cried, her breath stuttering like an engine dying in winter. Elias dropped beside her. What is it? What did she say? Clara looked up, her eyes wild with disbelief. She didn't die right away. She knew she was sick. She tried to find me. She begged them not to separate us. Her voice cracked. She begged them. Elias reached for the letter and gently took it. His eyes scanned the shaky handwriting. If anything happens to me, please find my sister Clara. She's the only one I trust. Promise me he won't end up like we did. Promise me. He read it aloud, voice shaking, every word tearing deeper. The silence afterward pressed like a stone on their chests. She trusted the system, Clara whispered. And they threw you away. Elias's jaw clenched, tears sliding quietly. Now. They told me I was a ward of the state. They told me I had nobody. They chose to lie. Clara stood slowly, letter pressed to her heart. This changes everything. Elias, we weren't strangers. We were blood. Clara stood in the center of the room, the letter pressed to her chest like armor and wound all at once. Her breathing was ragged, each inhale shaking as if it scraped against old, forgotten bones. I waited for a sign, she whispered, eyes unfocused. All these years I waited by the door thinking I was crazy for hoping you'd return. Elias's voice was low, angry now, but controlled. I went through 13 homes, Clara. 13. And not one of them ever said I had someone looking. For me. He turned away, fists clenched. I used to dream about you. About that one summer I had peace. I thought maybe I made you up. Clara reached out, but he flinched. "I don't blame you," he said quickly. I don't know what to do with this kind of anger." His eyes were glassy again. "They stole my entire identity. And they left you to rot in that house alone, thinking no one needed you." Clara's knees buckled into the armchair, as a scream pressed against her ribs but never left her throat. "I wrote letters to the Child Services office," she whispered. "For 3 years after you vanished. I begged for updates. They never answered." Her fingers dug into the letter like it might disappear again. "All this time I thought I failed you, but they erased me." Her voice cracked. "They made us both feel disposable." Clara's eyes narrowed as she stared at the name signed at the bottom of the letter's official stamp. "Wait," she whispered, her voice distant. "I've seen this name before." Elias stepped closer. "Who is it?" Her hand trembled as she turned toward an old filing box near the bookshelf. "When I fought for custody of another girl years ago, that name was on the rejection form." She yanked the box open, fingers flipping through ancient manila folders, the sound of paper rushing like wind through a graveyard. "Yes, here." She pulled out a faded document. "Susan K. Albright." The same name, same handwriting, same cruel signature. She was the social worker who denied me every time I applied to foster again. Elias took the form and held it next to his letter. "It's her. She marked you as unfit, and later signed off that you were deceased." He stared at Clara. "She buried you on paper. On purpose." Clara's face went pale. "Why? Why would she do that?" Elias shook his head, but then his brow furrowed. "Unless it wasn't about you, it was about me." Clara's heart stuttered as realization sank in. You were a ward with government assistance. If you had no relatives, they could place you anywhere. Get more funding per placement." Elias's lips parted. "You think someone profited from keeping us apart?" Clara nodded slowly, horror dawning in her eyes. "It wasn't a mistake. It was a system." And just then, the phone rang. An old landline Clara hadn't touched in years. It sat dusty on the wall, silent for over a decade. But now it rang loud, sharper than any sound in the room. Clara's spine straightened. "Nobody has this number anymore," she said, frozen. Elias stared at it, the shrill ring slicing through the silence. "Answer it," he whispered. Clara's hand hesitated over the receiver, heart pounding like a trapped bird. She gripped it and lifted, her voice barely a whisper. "Hello?" A cold, unfamiliar voice answered, low and steady. "Ms. Bennett, you don't know me, but I've been watching. You're closer than you think to the truth." Elias tensed beside her, eyes sharp as daggers. The caller paused, then said, "You need to stop digging. Some doors, once opened, never close. And not everyone wants the past uncovered." Clara's breath hitched, but she didn't hang up. "Who are you?" she demanded, voice trembling yet fierce. "Someone who wishes you'd listen," came the reply. Then the line went dead. Elias slammed the receiver down, fists clenched, tight. "They know," he said grimly. "Whoever they are, they're watching us now." Clara's eyes flicked toward the locked front door, suddenly feeling vulnerable in her own home. "We have to be careful," she whispered. "This isn't just about us anymore." A slow knock echoed from the door, soft, deliberate. Neither moved. The knock came again, sharper this time, echoing through the empty hallway. Clara swallowed. Hard, her mind racing. "Should I open it?" Elias shook his head, voice low but firm. "Not yet. We don't know who's out there." Clara paced the room, her breath shallow, eyes darting toward the door every few seconds. Elias sat on the edge of the couch, fists clenched, fighting the urge to stand and confront the unknown. "We can't trust anyone," he muttered. "This goes deeper than just a lost letter or a messed-up file." Clara stopped staring at him. "What do you mean?" He took a deep breath, voice dropping. "Back when I was in the system, strange. Things happened. Kids disappearing, files vanishing. I thought it was bad luck. Now I know it was deliberate." Clara's heart thumped harder. "So this isn't just about us?" Elias shook his head slowly. "No, it's a web, Clara, and we're caught in the center." Suddenly the lights flickered, plunging the room into semi-darkness. Clara's breath hitched as the old house seemed to creak with unseen presence. "They're trying to scare us," she whispered, clutching the letter tighter. Elias stood, moving toward the window, peering out into the night. "We need answers, before they come back." A soft tapping at the window made them both jump. Clara's eyes locked on a shadow slipping away into the darkness. "Someone's been here," she said, voice trembling but fierce. Elias nodded grimly. "They want us to stop, but we can't." Suddenly, Clara's phone buzzed on the table, an unknown number. She picked it up, heart racing. The message was short, chilling. "Stop digging or lose everything." The room fell silent again, heavy with threat, and the promise of a fight. They didn't choose but couldn't escape. Clara sat down slowly, the weight of the warning settling deep into her bones. "We need a plan," she said quietly, scanning the dim room for any sign of movement. Elias nodded, rubbing his temples as if trying to squeeze out clarity from the chaos. "First, we find out who's behind this. Whoever wants us silent has to be stopped." Clara's eyes hardened with resolve. "I'm going back to the county archives tomorrow. If those files exist anywhere, I'll find them." Elias looked up, hope flickering despite the fear. "Good. And I'll reach out to an old friend, someone who knows the system better than anyone." The two shared a brief, determined glance. The fight was no longer just personal. It had become a battle for truth, justice, and the family stolen from them. Outside, the wind whispered against the windows, as if warning them the storm was just beginning. Clara folded the letter carefully, slipping it into her jacket pocket. "Tomorrow changes everything," she said, standing tall despite the fear. Elias followed her gaze to the locked door, then back to her. "We're ready," he said, "no matter what comes next." Clara stared at the locked front door, her mind racing with every unanswered question. The letter burning a hole in her pocket felt heavier than ever. Elias paced the room, each step echoing like a ticking clock counting down to danger. "We can't stay here," he said finally, voice low but urgent. She nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "Tomorrow, I'll go to the county archives. If there's any record of what really happened to me, I'll find it." Elias stopped pacing and met her eyes. "And I'll contact someone who owes me a favor, an insider who can help us dig deeper." The air between them thickened with anticipation and fear, but also a fierce determination neither could ignore. Outside, shadows shifted as the night crept closer, reminding them that time was running out. Clara took a deep breath, steadying herself. "This isn't just about uncovering the past," she whispered. "It's about protecting our future. Whatever happens next, we have to be ready." Elias reached for her hand, gripping it tight. "We'll face it together." Clara's mind spun with a whirlwind of memories and fears, each one sharper than the last. She thought about the cold nights spent alone, wondering if anyone ever cared, if anyone was looking for her. Now that fragile hope was flickering again, fragile but fierce. Could she really face the truth after all these years? Elias's thoughts were darker, tangled with guilt and rage. He remembered the helplessness of being shuffled from one home to another, the endless questions with no answers. Seeing Clara, now standing strong but scared, stirred something fierce inside him, an urgent need to protect what they'd lost. Both wondered who had been watching them all this time, and what price they'd pay for digging too deep. The unknown felt like a shadow creeping closer, whispering threats they couldn't yet understand. But beneath it all, a stubborn spark of hope refused to be snuffed out. Clara clenched her fists, heart pounding with the weight of what was to come. This is more than just a fight, she thought. It's the chance to reclaim everything stolen from me, and from us. Elias exhaled slowly, steeling himself. No matter what, I won't let history repeat. Clara traced the outline of the faded letter once more, the edges worn from years of being hidden away. Every word on that page felt like a secret clawing, its way to the surface demanding to be heard. The silence in the room pressed down on her, heavy with unspoken truths. Elias watched her, knowing this was the calm before the storm. Her fingers trembled as she spoke, voice barely above a whisper. If Susan Albright signed those papers, then everything we thought was real was a lie. Elias nodded, the fire in his eyes burning brighter. She's the key. If we find her, we find the answers, and maybe the people who wanted us erased. Clara's mind raced, piecing together fragmented memories of cold offices, dismissive voices, and doors slammed. Shut. I remember the looks they gave me, like I was nothing more than a number. But this was deliberate. Elias stepped closer. They built a wall between us and the truth. But walls can be broken. Outside, the wind howled like a warning, rattling the windows with urgency. Clara felt the weight of what was coming, the danger, the deception, and the chance to finally reclaim her life. We're not just fighting for ourselves, she said quietly. We're fighting for every forgotten child they tried to bury. Clara's breath caught as the realization hit her like a punch. They didn't just want to keep me away. They wanted me erased. Her hands shook, the weight of years of silence crushing down in an instant. Elias's eyes darkened, fury boiling beneath the surface. This was never just about us. It's bigger. Corruption, lies, people playing God with lives. Her voice cracked, but she refused to back down. If they succeeded, no one would remember. No one would fight back. Elias paced, fists clenched tight enough to turn white. We have to expose them before they come for us again. The room seemed to close in, shadows lengthening like the threat looming over them. Clara swallowed hard, tears pricking her eyes, but the fire inside blazed stronger. I won't be invisible anymore. Elias nodded, his jaw set. We'll bring the darkness into the light. Together. The silence that followed wasn't peace. It was the calm before a war they were ready to wage. Outside, the wind screamed against the windows as if echoing their resolve. Clara's heartbeat thundered in her ears, a battle cry for justice, for truth, and for the family they'd almost lost forever. This ends now, she whispered. Clara's phone buzzed again. This time, a video message from an unknown number. Her hands trembled as she pressed play. The screen flickered to life, showing a dimly lit room and a shadowed figure. If you want the truth, the voice rasped, meet me tonight at the old pier. Come alone or risk losing everything. Elias grabbed her arm, eyes wide with warning. This could be a trap. Clara shook her head, determination blazing. It's the only chance we have. I need to know who's behind all this. The clock ticked louder in the silence, marking the countdown to a night that would change everything. They made a pact in that moment. No more running, no more hiding. Clara slipped the letter into her coat pocket and steeled herself. Tonight I face the past, and whatever comes with it. Elias nodded, standing beside her like a shield. Clara's heart pounded as she stood at the edge of the pier, the cold, wind whipping through her hair. Her goal was clear: Uncover the truth behind the lies that had stolen her past and threatened her future. No matter the danger, she vowed to bring the hidden corruption into the light. Elias's voice crackled through her earpiece, steady and reassuring. Watch your back. We don't know who's waiting, but remember, knowledge is power. Clara nodded, fingers tightening around the letter in her pocket. I'm ready. This ends tonight. She stepped forward, shadows dancing around her, each step echoing with the weight of years lost. The truth wasn't just a secret to uncover, it was the key to reclaiming everything stolen from her and countless others. Her breath caught as a figure emerged from the darkness, face hidden but voice unmistakable. You came, the stranger said. But are you ready for what you'll find? Clara squared her shoulders, unwavering. I have to be. The stranger stepped into the dim light, revealing a face Clara never expected. Sarah, the social worker who had signed the papers years ago. Clara's breath caught, shock and anger flooding her. You lied to me, she whispered, voice trembling. You erased my family. Sarah's eyes filled with regret, but her voice was steady. I didn't have a choice. They threatened me, forced my hand. I wanted to protect you, but... Her words faltered, heavy with guilt. Clara shook her head, tears burning. Protect? Me? You destroyed my life. Elias appeared beside her, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. We need the whole truth, Sarah. No more lies. Sarah nodded slowly, the weight of years pressing down. There was a network, people in power who profited from broken families. I was scared. Clara's heart shattered, but beneath the pain was a fierce determination. Fear won't control me anymore. I'm here to end this, for me and for every child they tried to silence. Sarah looked at her with a mix of sorrow and hope. Then let's finish this together. Clara's knees buckled, and she sank onto the cold, cracked wood of the pier, the weight of years crashing down all at once. Her breath hitched as tears spilled freely, the anger and betrayal mixing with a raw, aching sadness she'd buried deep inside. Elias crouched beside her, silent but steady, offering the only anchor she could grasp. I trusted you, Clara whispered brokenly, voice trembling like a fragile thread. I trusted someone to protect me, and they destroyed everything. The night air pressed heavy around them, swallowing her words into the darkness. Sarah stood awkwardly, guilt etched deep into her face, unable to bridge the chasm she had helped create. For a long moment, the world felt like it was collapsing, memories flashing like shards of glass, cutting through the fragile hope Clara had just begun to build. The fight seemed too big, too cruel, and her strength wavered under the weight of it all. But then Elias's hand found hers, squeezing gently. You're not alone. We're still here, and we'll face this, together. His voice was a lifeline, pulling her back from the edge of despair. Clara looked up, meeting Sarah's eyes with a cautious flicker of something new. Hope. If we do this together, she said softly, maybe we can stop this from happening to anyone else. Sarah nodded, her voice steady now. I've kept quiet too long. It's time to make it right. Elias stepped forward, determination etched in every line of his face. We'll need proof, allies, people who can help us expose the truth. Clara's fingers tightened around the letter, the weight in her pocket now feeling less like a burden and more like a weapon. Then, let's start fighting. The night around them seemed less cold, the wind gentler, as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for their next move. Clara's heart beat with renewed strength, a spark ignited by the promise of justice and the power of unity. We're not just survivors, Clara whispered. We're warriors, and this time, we're not backing down. Sarah and Elias exchanged a determined glance, the unspoken agreement binding them together. Clara took a deep breath, feeling the rage inside her start to soften, not because the pain was gone, but because she realized there was something stronger than anger. Compassion. This isn't just about revenge, she said quietly. It's about healing. For me, for Sarah, for everyone caught in this mess. Sarah looked at her, surprise flickering in her eyes. I never stopped caring, even when I was scared. Maybe we can use that. Turn pain into something better. Elias nodded slowly, his usual fire tempered by a new understanding. Justice doesn't have to mean destruction. It can mean change. Clara reached out, taking Sarah's hand in hers. We fight not to tear people down, but to build a future where no child feels forgotten. The cold night felt warmer now, as if the small circle of light around them was growing stronger. I want to believe that even in the darkest places there's hope, Clara whispered. And that sometimes forgiveness is the bravest kind of strength. Elias smiled softly, the first real peace they'd felt in years settling between them. Clara closed her eyes, letting the quiet settle over her like a balm. Her goal was no longer just uncovering the truth. It was finding healing in the cracks left behind. I want to understand, she whispered. Not just for me, but for everyone whose lives were torn apart. Elias nodded, his voice gentle yet firm. Healing means facing the past without letting it consume us. We can break the cycle, start something new. Sarah wiped a tear, her own regret softened by the possibility of redemption. Maybe this is how we make peace, with ourselves and with each other. The three of them stood united, not just as survivors, but as people ready to rebuild. Clara felt the weight of years lift, replaced by a fragile but growing strength. It won't be easy, she said, but it's the only way forward. Outside, the first hints of dawn broke through the night's shadows, casting a soft glow over the pier. It was a quiet promise of new beginnings and the courage to heal together. Clara took a steadying breath, the weight in her chest easing just a bit. Her goal now was clear. Healing, not hatred. I want to find peace, she said softly, to understand what happened and why, so I can finally let go. Elias looked at her with quiet respect. Healing means facing the pain, but not letting it define you. We can rebuild from here. Sarah's voice wavered with hope. If we can learn from the past, maybe no one else will have to suffer like this. Clara nodded, feeling the fierce fire inside soften into something gentler, yet stronger. It's not just about me anymore. It's about breaking the cycle for everyone who's been hurt. Outside, the world began to brighten. The first light of morning washing away the darkness. It felt like a new beginning, a chance to rise above the pain and find understanding. Just as Clara felt the fragile calm settle, Sarah's phone buzzed sharply. She hesitated, then showed them the screen. A series of encrypted messages, revealing a name that sent chills through Clara's spine. Evelyn Monroe. She's the real mastermind, Sarah whispered, voice trembling. The woman who orchestrated everything. The social worker, the lawyer, even my silence. She's been pulling the strings behind the scenes for years. Clara's heart pounded, the world tilting beneath her. Evelyn Monroe. I thought she was just a distant name in the files. But she's the reason my family was torn apart. Why she wanted me erased. Elias clenched his fists, eyes burning with fury. This changes everything. We're not just fighting shadows anymore. We're facing someone with power, someone who won't stop at anything. Clara's knees trembled, but Elias stepped closer, wrapping a steady arm around her shoulders. You're not alone anymore, he said firmly, his voice a shield against the darkness pressing in. Sarah pulled a soft blanket from her bag, draping it over Clara's trembling frame. We're here for you, all of us. No more secrets, no more silence. The warmth of their presence began to fill the cold night air, wrapping around Clara like a fortress. For the first time in years, Clara felt a flicker of safety, not from walls or locks, but from the people standing beside her, ready to face the storm together. She exhaled slowly, tears still falling but now mixed with relief. Thank you for not giving up on me. Sarah looked into Clara's tear-filled eyes, the weight of her past mistakes heavy between them. Instead of recoiling, she reached out, gently squeezing Clara's hand. I'm sorry for everything, not just for what I did, but for how I made you feel. Clara blinked, surprised by the tenderness breaking through the pain. Why show me kindness after all this? Sarah's voice was soft but certain. Because anger only destroys. But kindness, that can change everything. Elias nodded, stepping forward. When we choose empathy over judgment, we take back the power they tried to steal from us. Clara's lips curved into a fragile smile, the first real one in years. In that simple act of kindness, the balance shifted. What once was broken began to heal, not with force, but with understanding. Clara sat alone, the quiet pressing in around her like a heavy fog. Her mind raced. Could she truly forgive those who had betrayed her? The line between justice and mercy blurred, leaving her torn and vulnerable. Her heart urged her to fight, to expose every secret and make them pay. Yet, a softer voice whispered caution. What if revenge only bred more pain? What if healing meant something deeper? She clenched, her fists battling the storm inside. Can I choose compassion without losing myself? She wondered aloud, tears threatening to spill once more. Memories of betrayal mixed with moments of unexpected kindness, confusing her sense of right and wrong. The struggle wasn't just about others, it was about finding peace within her own fractured soul. Clara's eyes flickered with fierce determination, yet a flicker of doubt lingered beneath the surface. Every step forward felt like walking a razor's edge, between unveiling the truth and losing herself to the darkness. Her phone buzzed again. A new message, cryptic and urgent. They're watching. Trust no one. The words sent a chill, racing down her spine, tightening the knot of suspense in her chest. She swallowed hard, heart pounding not just from fear, but from the burning need to protect those she loved. This fight wasn't just personal anymore. It was dangerous. Her mind raced through possibilities, each one darker than the last. Who could she trust? What secrets were still buried, waiting to explode? Sarah stepped forward, her voice steady but gentle. Clara, I know I can't undo the past, but I want to make things right. Let's stop the fighting between us and work together. Clara hesitated, the walls she'd built trembling for the first time. Why now? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. Because I believe we're stronger united, Sarah said, eyes sincere. Holding on to pain only keeps us trapped. Let's choose peace, if not for us, then for the future we both deserve. Clara's mind drifted back to that rainy afternoon, the sharp sting of cold water as she pulled the beaten child from the alley. The girl's sobs had echoed in her ears, raw and desperate, a sound Clara thought she'd never forget. She remembered the bruises hidden beneath torn clothes, the fear in those wide, haunted eyes that mirrored her own childhood nightmares. That moment had changed everything, had set her on this path she never asked for, but couldn't turn away from. Late nights spent whispering promises of safety, the quiet lullabies sung to a frightened soul who needed hope more than anything. Clara's heart ached as she recalled the first time the child smiled, a fragile, trembling curve that lit a spark in the darkness. Those memories were both a blessing and a curse, pushing Clara forward but also weighing heavy with pain. They reminded her why she fought, why she couldn't give up, no matter how dark the road ahead. Clara stared at the cracked photo frame, her fingers trembling as she traced the faded faces inside. Forgiving felt impossible, like stitching together. Shattered glass that would only cut deeper. Her mind replayed every harsh word, every betrayal that had carved scars across her soul. How can I accept what they did? She whispered, voice breaking under the weight of old wounds. But somewhere beneath the pain, a tiny voice dared to hope, for peace, for freedom from the endless ache. Yet the battle raged fiercely inside. Her, between anger that screamed and a heart desperate to heal. She clenched her jaw, tears spilling as she wrestled with the choice: hold on to the bitterness that protected her, or risk letting go and risking more pain. Clara's breath caught as the doorbell rang sharply in the dead of night. Her heart pounded. Who could be here now after all these years? She hesitated, every nerve screaming caution, but something inside pushed her forward. The hallway stretched long and cold as she opened the door to a stranger's face. One that held a secret powerful enough to change everything. "I have something you need to see," the man said, voice low and urgent. "It's about Sarah and your past." The man stepped inside, pulling out a worn envelope thick with dust. This was hidden away for years, proof that everything you believed was a lie. Clara's hands trembled as she took it, eyes scanning the faded documents inside. Photos, letters, names, connections she never knew existed, weaving a story darker and more tangled than she could have imagined. "They weren't just victims or villains," the man said quietly. "They were pawns in a game far bigger than any of us realized." Clara's breath hitched as the truth settled like a storm inside her. Betrayal ran deeper than pain, and the people she once trusted were shadows in a dangerous web. Tears spilled freely, not just from heartbreak, but from release. The burden of ignorance lifted, replaced by a fierce clarity she hadn't felt in years. Clara's chest tightened as the floodgates burst open, years of pain crashing down like a relentless storm. Her voice trembled, raw and desperate. "Why? Why did you let it happen? Why did no one fight for me?" Tears poured freely, her body shaking with a rage and sorrow she'd kept buried too long. Memories collided, every cruel word, every silent betrayal, and they ignited a fire fierce enough to consume her doubts. "I was alone," she cried, left to pick up the pieces while they turned away. "I needed someone, anyone." Elias stepped closer, his eyes soft with understanding but fierce with support. "This ends now, Clara. You don't have to carry this pain alone anymore." The room trembled with the weight of her unleashed emotions, a storm breaking free after years of silent suffering. Just as Clara felt the weight of the storm threatening to swallow her whole, a quiet voice cut through the chaos. "You're stronger than you think," said Evelyn Monroe, stepping out of the shadows, eyes filled with remorse and determination. Clara's breath hitched, shock rooting her in place. Evelyn, the very woman who had caused so much pain, now stood before her, not as an enemy, but as someone willing to fight alongside her. "I've made mistakes," Evelyn confessed, voice steady but vulnerable. "But I want to help you expose the truth and bring those real villains to light." Evelyn reached into her bag and pulled out a small, worn USB drive. "This contains everything: recordings, photos, confessions from the people behind the lies." Clara's hands shook as she took the drive, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and anticipation. "How do I know this is real?" Evelyn's eyes met hers, unwavering. "Because I recorded it myself. I couldn't stay silent any longer." Clara plugged the drive into her laptop, the screen flickering to life with videos, hidden conversations, whispered admissions, faces she recognized from her darkest memories. Clara's knees buckled as the final confession echoed through the room. Tears streamed down her face, each word cutting deeper than the last. She sank to the floor, trembling, overwhelmed by the weight of years spent in silence and pain. The walls seemed to close in, but the flood of emotion was a release she hadn't known she needed. "I've carried this alone for so long," she whispered between sobs, her body shaking with raw vulnerability. Evelyn knelt beside her, offering a steady hand and silent support, knowing this breakdown was the first step toward healing. Months later, Clara stood by the window of her new home, sunlight spilling across her face. The weight of the past still lingered, but it no longer controlled her. She had rebuilt her life piece by piece, finding strength in forgiveness and courage in the truth she had uncovered. The scars remained, but they told a story of survival, not defeat. Sarah's voice came through the phone, warm and steady. "We did it, Clara, together." Clara stood at the doorstep of the shelter, heart pounding with a mix of fear and hope. Today was the day she would finally rescue the child she had once saved, now a young girl named Mia, lost and scared, but ready to be found. As the door opened, Mia's eyes met Clara's, wide with uncertainty but flickering with a fragile trust. "I'm here," Clara whispered, reaching out her hand. Tears welled in Mia's eyes as she stepped forward, the years of pain melting away in the warmth of Clara's embrace. "This time, you're safe," Clara promised, her voice steady with conviction. "No more running, no more hiding." Months passed, and Clara's home filled with laughter, a sound once foreign but now deeply cherished. Each morning began with warm sunlight and the promise of fresh beginnings. Mia blossomed, her smile growing brighter with every day spent in safety and love. Clara watched her, heart swelling with pride and quiet joy. Old wounds no longer defined them. Instead, they shaped the strength that carried them forward. Together they built rituals, bedtime stories, shared meals, and dreams whispered late at night. Clara stood across from Evelyn in the quiet cafe, the weight of years hanging between them like fragile glass. Neither spoke at first. Only the hum of distant voices filled the space. "I never thought we'd find our way back," Clara finally said, eyes searching Evelyn's for a sign of the old trust. Evelyn nodded slowly. "We can't change the past, but maybe we can build something new, from the ashes." They shared a tentative smile, a fragile peace settling between them like a whispered promise. Life isn't always easy. It's messy, complicated, and full of unexpected twists that challenge everything we thought we knew about ourselves and others. Sometimes it feels like the world is stacked against us, like the pain and struggles we carry are invisible burdens no one else can see or understand. But here's what I want you to remember, especially if you're watching this and feeling weighed down by your own battles. You are not alone. Your story matters. And no matter how dark the night, there is always a dawn waiting to break through. The journey of healing isn't a straight path. It's filled with setbacks, doubts, and moments when you want to give up. But every step you take forward, no matter how small, is a victory. It's proof of your strength and courage to keep going when everything inside you screams to stop. Empathy is the bridge that connects us all. When we choose to listen, to understand, and to hold space for someone else's pain without judgment, we create a ripple of kindness that can change lives, including our own. Because true healing begins when we open our hearts, not just to others, but to ourselves. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or excusing the wrongs done to us. It means freeing ourselves from the chains of bitterness and anger that keep us trapped in the past. It's a radical act of self-love that allows us to reclaim our power and rewrite our stories on our own terms. We all carry scars, some visible, many hidden. But those scars are not signs of weakness. They are badges of survival. They remind us that we have endured, that we have grown, and that we are still standing. If you're watching this and struggling, know this. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to lean on others. Strength isn't about facing everything alone. It's about having the courage to reach out and say, "I need support." And for those who have someone in your life going through tough times, your compassion can be the lifeline they desperately need. A simple act of kindness, a listening ear, or just being present without trying to fix everything can make a world of difference. Remember, no matter what you've been through, your past does not define your future. You have the power to heal, to grow, and to create a life filled with hope, love, and meaning. So take a deep breath and give yourself grace. Celebrate the small victories, hold on to the moments of joy, and keep moving forward. Your story isn't over. It's just beginning. Thank you for being here, for witnessing this story, and for sharing in this journey. May you find peace, strength, and endless hope in your own life. If this message resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because together, we can build a community that lifts each other up and spreads light in even the darkest places. Stay strong, stay kind, and never stop believing in the power of your own story.